Icarus agreed to take watch that night, but fatigue soon took over and he fell asleep after only 2 hours. In the early morning of the second day, he was awoken by the ringing of a sponsor gift. He grabbed the gift and unwrapped the box to see sausage rolls, cheese tarts, bacon, and some bread with jam. Icarus said, "About time," under his breath, before reading the note which came with the gift. "Sorry for the delay. Too many people wanted to sponsor you. Took me forever to figure out which gifts you needed. R." Icarus grinned and crossed over to Aurelia, who was sleeping with her back against one of the trees. He shook her awake, before putting a finger to his lips and pointing at the breakfast he had received. Aurelia grinned and thanked Icarus, before splitting one of the sausage rolls with him. As Aurelia bit into the sausage roll and squealed with delight, she asked Icarus if he ate this every day in the capital. Icarus admitted that he had moved to District 2 in order to train for the games 13 years ago, and in order to gain muscle and grow taller, he mainly ate eggs, salmon, yogurt, shrimp, beans, chicken, and drank goat milk. Aurelia asked him what he thought of the milk. Icarus shrugged and said it was different to what he was used to in the capital. Icarus then laughed as he told Aurelia that in the morning he had to wake up early in order to ride a hovercraft to the academy he attended in the capital, and had to return home after 7 hours in order to attend the Dalton elite classes for another 6 hours. Aurelia asked him if he ever felt sleepy, but Icarus smirked and shook his head. The pair began eating together, until Aurelia asked Icarus if he wanted to do it. Icarus looked at the sky before asking Harmonia if he could kiss Aurelia, and barely minutes later, another sponsor gift came down. Icarus opened it to see some makeup and hair products, before examining one of the chocolate bars the gift contained. As he glanced at the note, he saw that it read, "This is for A. Harmonia says yes, but only with your top off. R." Icarus smiled and handed Aurelia the chocolate bar, which she intently examined. Icarus then took off his jacket and shirt, with Aurelia following suit. They then began kissing, which seemed to appear amusing to the viewers in Snowswear. Rubius, however, appeared annoyed and muttered, "She's going to snap his neck," under his breath. However, this did not happen, and the pair happily continued kissing until a cannon went off. This cannon belonged to the girl from 9, who had gotten into a fight with her district partner, Fonio, which angered him and caused him to fight back, and a physical fight ensued, during which Fonio accidentally pulled the girl's hair, which caused her to lose her balance and fall down the mountain to her death. Fonio appeared perplexed at her death, although he calmly walked away. Spectacle and Emerald both woke up, which made Aurelia and Icarus quickly put their shirts back on. Spectacle asked who this cannon belonged to, yet Icarus and Aurelia did not know. Emerald spun around and told them she could see a figure on the mountains, which was revealed to viewers to be Drape from 8, who appeared to be muttering anxiously to himself. Spectacle asked if they should attack him, but Icarus told them Drape was far too away and they needed to rest. Spectacle grabbed one of the cheese rolls from the previous day and bit into it, whilst Aurelia discreetly hid the breakfast she and Icarus had received. Meanwhile, Syndicate took first watch for her group, and as Carmack went to sleep, she began whimpering and talking about how much she wanted to go home. Stretcher, who appeared to be experiencing insomnia tonight, got up and told Syndicate that only 11 tributes remained, and she could make it back home to District 12 if she tried. Syndicate asked Stretcher how he felt about the games, which made him sob. Syndicate asked him what was wrong, and Stretcher told her his mother had been a mine surveyor just like Syndicate. But while surveying one of the mines, a blaster had accidentally blown up a part of his mine without realizing his mother was in there. Stretcher continued sobbing as he told Syndicate that he had only been 8 years old, and his father had fallen into a depression shortly after her death. Syndicate told Stretcher she was sorry, before asking him the name of the blaster who had killed his mother. Stretcher sobbed once more before saying the man whose name's Dianthus Clade. The color vanished from Syndicate's face as Stretcher repeated Dianthus Clade's name, before he asked her what was wrong. Syndicate muttered that Dianthus Clade was her father's name, which caused Stretcher to shrug. He told her the past was the past before wiping his eyes and going back to bed. As the sun rose, Syndicate woke up Stretcher and Carmack and they began eating some of the bread, but then heard a scream. Stretcher examined the mountain to see the girl from 9 falling to her death, followed by her cannon. Syndicate once again apologized to Stretcher about his mother's death, yet he calmly told her that he was happy she would not have to see him die in the games. Syndicate rubbed Stretcher's arm, before smiling sympathetically at him and giving him some of her bread. The trio spent the next hour analyzing the potential strengths and weaknesses of the other 7 tributes. Stretcher announced that he was going to try hunting for the careers later in the day, while Syndicate appeared concerned that Drape from 8 was staying hidden for a reason. As Stretcher announced his plans to kill the careers, Carmack told him he would like to kill Spectacle as payback for the death of Peppa. Stretcher agreed to hunt Spectacle and the others with Carmack before lying down and resting. Icarus and Aurelia watched as the District 1 tributes ate the bread, whilst discreetly grabbing some of the bacon from the sponsor gift Icarus had received. Aurelia smeared some of the lipstick on her lips before smiling and kissing Icarus. Spectacle appeared confused by the sudden romance between the 2 tributes, yet he did not say anything and continued eating. The group discussed their plans for the day, which largely consisted of hunting down tributes. Just then, a voice squealed. Icarus spun around to see that Islanda from 4 had been sneaking up on them with her trident, but had tripped and had fallen into the net covering the trees. Spectacle let out a malicious grin before smirking and muttering "fresh meat" under his breath and running towards Islanda. Icarus, Aurelia, and Emerald leapt to their feet before crawling under the net and beginning to chase Islanda as well. Emerald could be heard laughing as Islanda squealed. Icarus did not follow Islanda, however, and instead cut through the middle of the forest. As he ran, he saw Islanda barely 30 meters to his left, and he ran ahead. Islanda failed to notice Icarus as he ran into a clearing where she was running towards, and she only noticed him when it was too late. She launched her trident at him, but he ducked and it flew above his head. Icarus lunged at Islanda, which knocked her off her feet. He snatched his sword and brought it down on her stomach, but to his anger, as the sword was serrated, the blade got stuck in her jacket. Icarus swore and brought his sword up with a bit of difficulty, whilst Rubius was shouting that the serrated sword was used for slashing, not stabbing. Icarus finally came to this realization and sliced his sword across Islanda's neck just as his allies ran into the clearing. Icarus slashed her throat once more before pushing her away and sighing in exasperation as her cannon sounded. Spectacle and Emerald congratulated Icarus for killing Islanda, yet Icarus seemed exhausted and as he walked back to their camp, he opened the only unopened bag to see a long golden sword wrapped in plastic. He gasped in admiration and unwrapped his sword, before throwing his old sword on the ground and kicking it away. Spectacle asked Icarus if he could take the sword, which made Icarus point to the daggers in Spectacle's pocket as well as his machete, which was leaning against a tree. Stretcher and Syndicate planned their ambush on the careers with Carmack for a few hours. Carmack agreed to give Stretcher a spear and Syndicate a slingshot and 2 rocks. Carmack noticed Fonio observing the trio from the mountains. Although Carmack alerted Stretcher and Syndicate, Stretcher ignored him and said Fonio was not a threat at the moment and they could wait for a few more days before killing him. Carmack shrugged before practicing his knife throwing. He encouraged Stretcher to practice with his spear, while showing Syndicate how to use a slingshot. Stretcher appeared to be good at throwing spears, but then remembered that he had an axe. He threw the axe at the tree, before throwing the spear towards Carmack and grabbing the axe from the tree. Icarus waited until Spectacle and Emerald had turned around, before splitting one of the cheese rolls in half and giving it to Aurelia. Aurelia affectionately kissed him, and Rubius exasperatedly told Priscilla that no one would believe the first time they had met each other, Aurelia had attacked him. Icarus began swiping his sword at trees while Spectacle swung his mace into the ground as hard as he could. Aurelia practiced firing arrows at the trees whilst Emerald rummaged through her bag and asked Icarus what he had eaten this morning. Icarus shrugged and said he hadn't eaten anything this morning. Emerald raised her eyebrows, and Aurelia told her that as they were from District 2, they were not as reliant on food as the District 1 tributes. Aurelia opened a bottle of water before slowly sipping some of the icy water. Spectacle breathed out in glee for a few seconds, before telling Icarus he had dreamt of competing in the games since the age of 5. Icarus told him that he had begun training for the games at the age of 5, which made Spectacle roll his eyes. Icarus then told Spectacle only 9 tributes now remained, and that they should go for a hunt. Spectacle cheered out before saying he hoped to go on a hunt as well. Icarus handed Spectacle his old sword before grabbing his new golden sword and calling for Aurelia to follow them. Carmack and Stretcher, who had been watching the careers from their clearing, swore as the pack got up and began moving towards the mountains. Stretcher told Carmack to pursue the careers with Syndicate whilst he figured out a way to ambush them. Carmack agreed, and he and Syndicate held their respective weapons, a dagger and a slingshot, tightly. The couriers began moving more quickly before jogging, which made Cormac signal to Syndicate that they had to pick up their pace. Now more erratic than ever, Cormac and Syndicate and Stretcher agreed to meet back at their camp in 20 minutes. The trio broke off in their separate ways, and Cormac and Syndicate began jogging after the couriers. Stretcher grabbed his axe and cut through the middle of the forest and got further away from the couriers. He realized his mistake and spun back around before walking in the opposite direction. However, the thick trees disoriented him, and he continued moving in the wrong direction, away from the couriers and away from Cormac and Syndicate. Cormac and Syndicate continued running after the couriers, picking up their pace as they went. The couriers made their way towards the more elevated section of the forest, and as Cormac and Syndicate pursued them, they made their way up the mountain. The couriers noticed something and began sprinting. As Cormac grinned and cocked his head in the direction of the couriers, a shrill scream was heard. The couriers had made their way up the mountain in the hopes that they could find Drape and kill him. However, they heard Fonio sitting in a clearing, sobbing, and muttering to himself that he wanted to go home. Spectacle tried to stop his laughter at Fonio's tears, which made Icarus frown at him. Icarus and Aurelia crouched behind a rock, and as Fonio wiped his tears, they jumped out. Fonio screamed and attempted to run, yet Spectacle swung his sword and threw it horizontally at Fonio's leg. Fonio cried in pain and collapsed to the ground, before attempting to crawl away. Rubius gagged in disgust at the wound in Fonio's thigh, yet to his surprise, Fonio managed to get to his feet and hobble away. Spectacle and Emerald both began laughing as Fonio hobbled away, which angered Icarus and caused him to chase after Fonio. Spectacle shouted, "Make it iconic!" at Icarus, which made Emerald laugh and Aurelia roll her eyes. Icarus grinned and imitated Fonio by slowly hobbling after him. Spectacle, Emerald, and Aurelia cheered as Icarus snarled at the now trembling Fonio, who was now on the ground once again. As he crawled to the end of the clearing, Icarus strutted towards Fonio. Fonio leapt to his feet and ran with a limp, which made Icarus laugh. Fonio began whimpering as Icarus ran after him. Due to Icarus being much taller than him, he easily caught up with Fonio and grabbed him by the jacket. Spectacle once again shouted at Icarus to make it iconic, and Icarus examined Fonio. Fonio begged for mercy, saying he was only 13 and he wanted to go back home to his father's bakery. Icarus heard Spectacle and Emerald shout once more as they entered the clearing, and Icarus whispered, "Sorry, pal," before grabbing Fonio and snapping his neck. Fonio's cannon sounded almost immediately. As his body began to fall, Icarus yanked it by the hair and threw it down the mountain. His body landed in the water with a splash, and Spectacle congratulated Icarus for the iconic death of the Nine. Icarus rolled his eyes, and as soon as Spectacle and Emerald had turned away, he told Aurelia that he had not enjoyed killing Fonio. Aurelia nodded at Icarus, before asking why they needed to be rewarded for killing children. Stretcher had been sprinting farther away from the couriers until he finally realized he needed to go back to his allies' camp in order to grab his spear. As he made his way, with difficulty, back to the clearing, Fonio's cannon boomed out and Stretcher watched as Icarus threw him off the mountain. Stretcher grabbed his spear and walked towards the mountains. Syndicate and Cormac were now hiding behind the same rocks that the couriers had rested behind only moments earlier. Cormac noticed Spectacle doing an immature victory dance at Fonio's death, and he prepared to throw his dagger at Spectacle's back. However, a wave of smoke suddenly rolled over the mountain, which was revealed to be hallucinogenic smoke by Game Maker Friend. Syndicate and Cormac immediately swore and fled, yet Cormac dropped his dagger onto the ground. As expected, the couriers began whimpering as voices could be heard from the smoke. Icarus began whimpering as Aeneas' voice boomed out, saying he was disappointed in him. As Aurelia ran, she shrieked as Priscilla's voice could be heard saying a tribute to this year's runner-up, Aurelia Bean. Spectacle sobbed as he heard his twin sister screaming for his help. Emerald covered her ears as Janice Castro could be heard screaming. Rubius muttered his breath and asked Priscilla why Emerald thought Janice's death was any of her business. As the couriers noticed a clearing which was not filled with smoke, Spectacle tripped over Cormac's dagger, which caused Cormac to squeal. He grabbed Syndicate and pushed her behind a nearby rock, before diving behind it as well. Syndicate aimed a rock at Emerald, yet as she threw it, the rock flew into a tree, alerting the couriers.